All attendees are muted.
Okay. So you should be seeing my face with my crazy hair and the PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to expand that so you can get a better look at that. You may lose my face, but sorry about that. Okay. So welcome to the webinar. This is the Building Personal Influence introduction. And I'm really excited. We got a great group of people that have signed up for the webinar, and we have a multicultural group as well. So in addition to people from coast to coast in the United States, we have representatives from Canada joining us. So welcome, Canadians. We also have people from Norway joining us, so welcome Norway, as well as Germany. I wish I knew German for hello. Somebody can teach me that. And Spain. Welcome, Spain. I love Spain. And anybody else? Okay, so that's pretty much what I saw in the registration. As you might know, my company is Observe, Connect, Influence. I talk about influential communications, and that is what we're talking about on the webinar today. So I want to open up with this. I don't know if you guys have seen this online. I'm sure you have. Usually on Facebook, there are all these quizzes like, which Archer character are you? Which Sherlock Holmes character are you? Which Game of Thrones character are you? And these quizzes are wildly popular. And I think one of the reasons why those quizzes are so popular is because people always want to get a little bit more insight about themselves. They want to better understand this inner world. And of course, when you attach the entertainment factor to it, then people really start to click away. And yes, I am one of those people that clicks on these. And if you wanted to know, I am Lana, I am Sherlock, and I am Tyrion. So I'd say those are pretty accurate. Okay. And you don't really need to look any further than a bookstore in the self-help section of a bookstore to better understand how much we strive and thrive to, or are curious about this inner world, wanting to understand how we think, why we think, all of these things. So understand that we are egotistical creatures, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means that we are very often focused on ourselves. It helps us with survival in many ways, but it also might hinder us when it comes to communication. Because effective communication means that you have to shift your focus from you to the other person, that you need to start understanding their inner world. The only thing is that obviously when it comes to communication, you can't get everybody to take a quiz and learn their personality type and get them to articulate their true thoughts and feelings. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So this course, this introduction webinar, is going to give you a few tools to help you shift that focus and better understand their inner world, so that way you can be more influential and be a better communicator. So the brain boggles the mind. We have this entire new science of neuroscience. I don't mean new as in the sense that it's brand new, but the technology is slowly growing, and we have so many more ways to better understand what is going on biologically speaking when we have certain thoughts and feelings and when we communicate. So it's a really, really exciting time to get into this communication and influential world. I have always been fascinated by human behavior. So a little bit about me, because I know some of you aren't too familiar with me or what I do, but hey, there's me when I have my hair done and makeup done. So this is, that's my headshot, but a little bit of background on me. I used to be an actress. That is what I wanted to do from day one. Since I was basically 14 years old, I decided that is the job I want to have for the rest of my life. And I went to college, and theater was my major. I loved everything about theater, and I knew that my dream was to go to London, and I did go to London. And then the next dream, of course, is to go to New York, and I did go to New York. But it was in New York where I realized that this world of acting wasn't for me. More or less, it boils down to the fact that I wanted more control over my destiny, even though I loved certain aspects of the craft of acting. And thankfully, that's when I discovered my passion for really studying human behavior, because actors, that's what they do. They pay attention to the people around them and try to dissect, like, okay, well, what caused them to do this, and what are they feeling, and how is that coming across in the way that they communicate with the world. And as well, actors are very introspective, so they look inward and think, why do I react this way? How do I react when something like this happens? How do others see me when I have these reactions? And that is what I realized that I really loved about the craft of acting. And so I started doing a whole lot of studies in this field. And so I basically went from this kind of a stage to this kind of a stage. And since then, I have been teaching these techniques to people of all different types of audiences and around the country. So again, it's all about trying to unlock what is behind the surface when people are communicating. That is really what being influential is about. It's that ability to look beyond what everybody else sees. And then the true influence, of course, is to build that strategy around those observations. So as my curiosity about this world grew and grew, I asked myself, well, who's really good at that? I mean, in the world of acting, it makes sense that, in the world of acting, you have the luxury of time. You can know that you have a role and you can prepare for that role. You can study a wide variety of people and get a sense of what you want to do there. But when it comes to real world practical application, I wanted to know who's really good at this skill set in normal life. Who is really good at adjusting to situations on the fly, and who is able to use this influential skill set in the real world and with practical application rather than just for the stage. And so the people that I realized who are highly skilled at this include these masterful influencers that I went out and I personally interviewed. So since then, I have had interviews with CIA field operatives. So these are the individuals out in the field who are given the mission to create rapport with a contact, build a relationship with that person, and turn them into an asset. As well as DEA agents, specifically undercover DEA agents. Again, they have to build a relationship with a specific target in order to get information to hopefully convict bad people. And trial attorneys. So trial attorneys, it's a little bit different than just a one-on-one conversation, although they do need that relationship with the judge. It's a conversation with 12 people and trying to convince 12 people to make a particular decision. And I have also interviewed hostage negotiators. These people fascinate me so much. So much is on the line, and the outcome is based on what they say and their presence, and how they are able to stay present with a particular individual who's clearly in crisis. And lives can be saved or lost based on what this one person does. And so they were amazing people to talk to. And then military intelligence. So similar to the CIA operatives as well as the undercover DEA agents, these are guys who are out in field and do field interrogations, which means that they're meeting somebody in the village and having a casual conversation using elicitation techniques to get information from their contact. I also interviewed con artists. I think that that's pretty simple and straightforward to understand how those guys are influential. And I interviewed pickup artists. And I love this slide because it makes me laugh every time. So, a guy with an accordion, how is that not sexy? And so what was so interesting about this wide variety of people that I interviewed who use these practical influential techniques is that they all use the same process. And so I have compiled those techniques that they all use into the things that I train. So this is some of the top line right here are some of the places where I've written about this content. And then some of the lines, the bottom logos are organizations from which my private coaching clients come from. So I feel very, very fortunate to share this information because I think that influence shouldn't be limited to the hands of people who are in these covert worlds, who are undercover, who are in intelligence, who are con artists using these influential techniques for not so good things. I think that more people in our world who are doing positive things need to understand influence. They need that same language around influential communications. And that's what we're talking about today. So again, all of those people from the military to criminals to trial attorneys, insert joke here, and others, they all follow the same influential process. And that process basically boils down to these stair-step steps. The first one is you set your intention. Influence is goal setting. It begins with goal setting, just like any plan. You need to know the outcome that you're going for first. And then you observe the other person, you access your resource state, you connect with that person, and then ultimately you influence that person. Obviously, in our short time together, I'm not going to be able to go through this entire process and all of those nuances. I'm going to hit some of the highlights in the observe, connect, and influence sections. So obviously, people get very excited about influence, but you have to start with your foundation, and the foundation begins with observation. Based on what you guys put in your webinar registration, this is what you are most interested in, and so I am giving it to you. You need to look for those motivational triggers. There are about 10 strong motivational triggers that we all share. The only difference is what is the hierarchy, what is the level of value that we place on each of those. So for one person, motivational trigger number 5 may be number 1 in their hierarchy. You need to figure out which ones are most effective for which people. I can't cover all 10, but I'm going to give you 3 of my favorites. Okay, yeah. So we all share these, and you got to figure it out. Look at that. Okay. The first one is for desire and recognition, and for desire of recognition and appreciation. This is really where con artists thrive. This is usually the number 1 motivational target that they go for. And you want to know why? It's because we are so starved for recognition and appreciation. Right now, as you're sitting in your car or sitting in your office, raise your hand if you feel underappreciated. I cannot see you, but I'm pretty freaking sure everybody's hand went up. We don't feel like we get a true appreciation when at work. We feel like we don't get true appreciation at home. And it's because people don't seem to have the skill set to be present with another human being, especially when we have so many distractions like our phones and our iPads and advertisements and all of these things going on in our world. We've lost this ability to fully see the person in front of us. And because we are so starved for this, it makes it a really easy and amazing emotional, motivational trigger to go for. So if you right now, I want you to write down the name of a person that you have some sort of conflict with, some sort of static with, where your relationship isn't where you would like it to be, where you guys avoid each other perhaps, or when just the thought of them kind of irks you. Write down that name. And then I want you to think, what could I possibly appreciate about this person? What, all negative emotions aside, what is one thing that they are very good at? Bonus points if that thing that you're thinking of is something that they also take pride in. I'm being quiet because I want you writing. So now I want you to figure out sometime within the next 7 days to reach out to that person, find an opportunity to tell them that, to give them that appreciation. Yes, you may have to lower yourself a little bit by saying you're better at this thing than me, but it will pay off in dividends for that relationship. So, and another reason why I love this trigger is because it makes the world a better place. If we just recognize and appreciate our fellow human beings, I think so many problems can be fixed. Moving on to the next one. The next one is the desire to be seen as an expert or the tendency to show off. So if you haven't figured it out yet, I am sitting in front of this group of people virtually, and I stand in front of stages or on stages in front of people, and I coach people. This one is clearly a big trigger for me. You know somebody else who this is a strong trigger for. You may be one of them. The opposite of this phrasing of the desire to be seen as an expert, the opposite of this is nobody wants to look like an idiot, right? It all boils down to that. So what often happens when there's two individuals who have this trigger as number one in their hierarchy, that person number one is showing off, they're saying everything that they know about this subject, they're probably taking up most of the airtime during a meeting. And then person number two, who shares this trigger, is trying to, it's like a verbal battle. They're trying to figure out who's more of an expert. And this is where a lot of conflict comes from. So as an influencer, you need to realize that when somebody is showing off and, showing their peacock feathers and using this tendency to be seen as an expert, if you want to influence that person, then you need to give them that stage time. You need to step away and applaud them for their knowledge. Say, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. Thank you for that new perspective. It will make them feel better, and they will feel more rapport with you, and you can then motivate them, guide them towards your influential intention. So I was on a call recently with a prospect about me possibly speaking within this organization, and he rambled on and on and on and on, which shows me that he's more of an auditory has an auditory trigger for all those NLP people out there. And he basically said at one point, he said, I'm just not excited about your content. And he said, I'm just not excited about your content. I was like, okay, this is a first. And I said, well, what gets you excited? I'll come back to this in a little bit. But I said, well, what gets you excited? And he rambled on and on and on. And then finally it came down to, I just feel like I know everything in that field. Like, he felt very well studied in the area of communication. So if my value of being seen as an expert in that moment is being challenged, which it was, I easily could have tried to peacock feather my way through it, and we could have gotten in a battle, which would have hurt our rapport, and I would have gotten nowhere. It would not have served my ultimate purpose, which is to get this client. Fortunately, within that situation, he's not my decision maker. So there was no point in me battling it out with him and proving my expertise. I instead needed to figure out my way around him to get to the decision maker, and I have a phone call with him next week. So I just use that as an example of how sometimes tendencies and triggers can serve you and also work against you. You need to be aware of both sides of the coin. The next motivational trigger is we all desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and this boils down to significance. This obviously does dovetail nicely with the trigger of appreciation and recognition, but I want to take it one step further to, we all have a certain set of ideals that we strive for or like to be a part of. Being a part of something bigger can be on the lower scale, like individuals who love a sports team. When they talk about, we won yesterday, and you think, well, you don't play for the Yankees. Like, we did nothing. They did stuff. But we like to attach ourselves to something bigger than ourselves, to some team. So within your organization, if If people are lacking motivation, it's perhaps because you haven't made a clear connection between what they are doing in this moment and how it serves an overall vision for the team, for the group, for the company, for the people that you serve within your company. One of those connections has been disconnected. There are other ideals that people strive for when it comes to significance. For many, many people, legacy is a big, significant trigger. So if you're trying to motivate somebody where legacy is a strong trigger, then talk about how what they do now in this moment will have a lasting impact. Family is also a strong trigger for many individuals. Every single time I talked with military intelligence officers who worked in the Middle East, without a doubt, without exception, every single one of them talked about how culturally in the Middle East, family is a huge trigger. And so culture does play into how we structure that hierarchy. In the United States, it's a little bit different. We actually value independence quite a bit, and so that family trigger is diluted a little bit, again, depending on the individual. So figure out where their significant trigger lies. For me, legacy isn't as strong of a trigger as compared to teaching. Teaching is a trigger for me. I would much rather work one-on-one with an individual and see the light bulb go off in their eyes than the leaving some big legacy, like my name on a building somewhere. That doesn't get me nearly as excited. So I share that as an example of the different types that these triggers can be used. Okay, let's talk about connection. Without a doubt, in order to be influential, you need to be an authentic chameleon. So you need to change. You need to change how you communicate. You need to change your approach when you want to influence somebody, but you still need to be authentic in what you do. So con artists they change quite a bit, but they really aren't authentic. They're just really good actors. They possibly are sociopaths and are able to do that. I hope that you are not a sociopath. I want you to stay true to who you are, but I want you to look inwardly enough and see your own patterns and then figure out where you might be able to break some of those patterns. And the reason why this authentic chameleon concept is so important is when I interviewed these people, I honestly thought that all of them would be like this picture right here. I thought that they would be like these semi-evil, creepy puppet masters that had all these nefarious plots and everything. But really and truly, that wasn't the case at all. They were so kind and normal. Like for so many of them, I thought, you should be selling me insurance. Like, you're just a normal dude. But and one of the reasons is because they spent so much time paying attention and listening, looking for the things that they needed to look for to draw their conclusions. They weren't trying to influence me in those moments, but clearly this is a skill that they just use all the time. Versus, I don't know if you know who this guy is. Honestly, I can't remember his name, but he's on this show on CNBC. I think it's like Money Talks or something. And this guy is basically kind of like a Wolf of Wall Street kind of person, where he's a sports bookie guy where people make bets through him, and if the team wins, then he gets a cut. I know very little about gambling. That's the extent of my knowledge. But everybody within his office on this show is calling up people one after the other, trying to get them to sign up for their gambling business. And all of them are using the same tactic. It's, are you in or are you out? Are you wanting to make money or are you just going to be a loser all day long? And just that one tactic of being a douche. So, but then I struggled every time when I saw something like this, like Wolf of Wall Street or like this person, because I cannot deny that what they are doing isn't influential. It is. They are making money. They are successful people. So I was trying to figure out, like, well, this goes against everything that I teach. How can I make this make sense? And it wasn't until, honestly, a few weeks ago that it finally hit me. These guys in this office and in the Wolf of Wall Street and all that stuff are playing a numbers game. If somebody says no, they hang up the phone, they go to the next person. That is a very different world from the type of people that I interviewed and the way I view influence. So the Wolf of Wall Street type guys, they have multiple targets to shoot for. If they miss one target, they just try to hit the next one. Versus true masterful influencers usually have one target and one goal. They have one person that they can develop that relationship with. A CIA agent is given the task to try to influence one person that has critical information. In your life, you don't have a choice as to who you might need to influence. You have one boss that you need to try to convince to give you a promotion. You have one sales associate that you need to try to motivate to perform better. You have one benefactor that you need to try to motivate to donate to your cause. So that is where this authentic chameleon comes from, is that you need to be flexible in your approach to these things. So it's not to say that that playing that numbers game doesn't work. It does. I say that it is influential. I would argue that it's not true influence. True influence is having the ability to change your tactics and change your strategies. All right. So for some of the techniques, I don't think I'm covering some of them in this one, but I do like to bring up the fact that ego suspension is a part of that. Like I mentioned in the expert trigger, I had to step down my ego to avoid that battle with that guy. So you might need to take a look at your patterns and see if they're really serving you, and not judge yourself or judge somebody else based on what works for them or their values. You need to suspend that ego momentarily in so many of your influential efforts. So when it comes to connecting and being that authentic chameleon, there are a few different areas that I recommend that you look at to find those connection points. If the two of you have shared values, then obviously that's a really strong connection point to go for. If you have shared beliefs, shared experiences, this is usually an easy one for people to identify, but most people are limited by the fact that if they don't have shared experiences, then they got nothing else to look for. Well, you can look for those values, beliefs, that significance trigger that I talked about before. And then these last three I'd like to point out: language, paralinguistic, and body language. Language is obviously the words that you say. Paralinguistic, it means the things that are not true words that we still communicate. So when somebody says something like, oh, huh, things along those lines, that's paralinguistic. So paying attention to that, and of course their body language. If you can break down the way in which they communicate with these three things, and mirror that back to them, then that's a strong way to create that connection. So if somebody's a fast talker, then step up your pace. That's paralinguistic. If somebody, let's say, if you're trying to sell somebody on a vacation package and you keep talking about vacation, 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 but then the other person that you're trying to influence likes you to use the word getaway, then change your language to match theirs. You both are talking about the exact same thing, but just making that simple adjustment in the language will have a stronger connection to what they have in mind. Vacation may be something relaxing to them, and a getaway is much more proactive or literally getting away from something that has a stronger connection to them. So pay attention to the language that they use about the subject matter that you're trying to influence them towards, and use that within your language. Body language as well. If they are leaning forward, then I recommend you lean forward, mirroring them. I'm not going to get into all the nuances of mirroring. Some of you are familiar with it, some of you aren't. But pay attention to their body language, and if you can incorporate the silhouette of their body language in yours, then I highly recommend you do that. All right. And one more. Come on, you can do it. Okay, skipping that for time's sake. So let's get to some influence. Motivational filters. So some of the ways that you can frame your influential conversation. We either move towards pleasure or away from pain. And the way in which people communicate will tell you if they are the type of people that move towards what they want, or if they're the type of people that move away from the things that they are afraid of or feel that would cause them pain. So one example that I use is motivating a team member. So if they are motivated by moving towards pleasure, then you might say, hey, you know what? If you get that done by noon, how about you take the rest of the day off? That might be motivating for them because they like to move towards that. If they're more of the type of person that it likes to move away from pain, then you may say, hey, if you don't get that done by noon, then I'm going to go ahead and set some time at 1 o'clock for us to sit down and have a conversation about what's going on and see what we need to do. And if you have that tone of that ominous tone in your voice, then that may be motivating for them to get their stuff done by noon. So you're saying the same thing, please get this done by noon, but the motivation that you're attaching to it changes depending on what is influential for that person. The other is internal versus external. Some people are motivated by their internal world, those emotions, those good feelings. The person that I talked to before who wasn't excited about my content, he mentioned that he is a heart leader. And he used that word specifically, I'm a heart leader. So he is highly motivated by his internal world. And that is again exemplified with his choice of language when he says whether he's excited or not. So he speaks from those emotions. Okay, so I told you I would come back to this whole excited thing. Notice the question that I asked him when he said he wasn't excited, and I said, well, what gets you excited? And how do you know when you are excited? And because he lives in that internal world, his response was, I just get excited. I hear something and it excites me. I know I'm excited because I feel excited. I kid you not, this is verbatim of what the man said. And it's fascinating to me, and this is an important lesson for you guys, because not everybody has the ability to communicate what influences them. So I needed to let him ramble on for a bit, and then he finally was able to get that language around, because he was hearing himself and he kind of picked up on the fact that it wasn't making sense. And then he was able to say, well, here are the things that excite me. I took it from the internal world and asked him, what is the evidence that you have to know when you are excited? And then that is what gave me the information I needed to hopefully persuade him later down the line. So for people in that internal world, when they use those emotional words and you're an external person, and generally speaking, you can't live in their internal world anyway, so you need to get it to external language, ask them, how do you know that? How do you know when? What happens when you feel X, Y, and Z? And then that will give you the triggers you need to be influential. And then some people are motivated by the external world. So these would generally be people like if they love the trigger of prestige, then these are the people that drive the big fancy schmancy car. They got the big fancy schmancy watch. They've got all of these different external triggers to demonstrate prestige. Other people love the external trigger of being applauded by their peers. So if you know somebody has a trigger with the external world of being applauded by their peers, then perhaps in a team meeting, you might give that recognition and appreciation during a team meeting rather than pulling that a person aside and giving it to them in your office. So these are just some of the ways that once you understand these triggers, then you can figure out that influential strategy for that individual person. I know I'm going fast, guys, but I really wanted to give you this content. Options versus procedures. Some people like to have options, and other people like to know, okay, this is how it's done. Usually procedures driven people also like tradition. So they like the way things have been for years and years and years. Tradition is a strong trigger for them as well. So if you're somebody trying to break tradition, then you may need to give them a nod to previous traditional activities within the organization. And so again, if you're an options person and you're leading a team, then you may be leading a team and saying, I don't know, guys, well, what do you think? We could do this, we could do that. We have all of these different options. And if your team is filled with procedure-driven people, then you're driving them freaking nuts. So limit those options to 2 or 3. There's a lot of psychological reasons behind that as well. Don't go into all these plethora of options, and then allow your procedure people to get down to the nitty-gritty and figure out step 1, step 2, step 3. If you're a procedures person, and you have a team full of options people, then obviously the reverse applies. Give them the time to brainstorm and come up with options, because that's what gets them energized. The Sullivan nod. This is a real subtle, influential technique that you can use. I first have to tell you that there's not a whole lot of sciencey stuff that backs it up, but there's a lot of anecdotal experiences that make it seem like it really does work very well. The Sullivan nod is often used by waiters and waitresses. And what this means is that if you're giving people a list of options, then if you very slightly nod your head up and down and have a small smile when you list the option you want them to choose, then it sends them a subconscious trigger that, oh, that seems more appealing than the others. The reason why I share the Sullivan nod is because I find it helpful for a number of reasons. One, I do believe that it triggers those subconscious thoughts. But 2, there is biofeedback that happens that if your body is doing something, then your brain catches up. So the reason why I like the Sullivan nod is that if you're nervous or if you don't fully believe in yourself in that moment when you're sharing something, then perhaps incorporate the Sullivan nod and nod when you speak and have a small smile. Your body feels that shift, and then your mind, and so when your body has those positive triggers, then it sends positive chemicals and hormones, and it then your mind catches up and says, oh, okay, this isn't as bad as I originally thought. There's a whole nother set of things that you can do with your body to get you in the zone, but okay, moving on. The because trigger. This one I love because it's so simple. It's so simple, you guys. You got to use it. When you need somebody to do something, chances are you give them the request. You say, could you get me that paperwork by tomorrow? It is more influential if you say, could you get me that paperwork by tomorrow because I need to fill out a form associated with it. That word because has been shown to get 80 to 90% more compliance than if you don't have that word in your request. So one example that I share often is one of my clients was saying, I'm just trying to get one of my team members to be more vocal during the staff meetings. He's just not talking. And I said, okay, well, what have you asked of him? And he said, I just asked him, I need you to be more vocal. Could you be more vocal? And I said, okay, what did the guy say? He said, okay, no problem, but then nothing changed. I said, why do you want him to be more vocal? What does that mean to you? And he replied with, it just shows that he cares. If he's sharing his opinion, then that means that he cares and he's engaged and he's paying attention. He's not just following orders. And I said, great, tell him that. Tell him, could you be more vocal in staff meetings? Because for me, it's a sign that you are engaged and you care about the project. And lo and behold, things started changing. If somebody doesn't understand your reasoning behind the request, then it limits your influential capabilities. Studies have also shown that if you use the word because, even with a silly reason behind it or a nonsensical reason behind it, it still gets results. And here is an example from a client of mine who shared this with me on Facebook. Just used the because technique on my boss to get him to do something, and it totally worked. I said, I need to do this now because it's better if I do it early. It was basically nonsense. I feel like a Jedi. So one simple technique can get a change in behavior. I love the because technique. I'm going to skip this one for now. Law of consistency is by far one of my favorites. It's one of the most nuanced though. So the way I remember the law of consistency is with a quote from Maya Angelou. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. So she usually talks about this in relationships, and I just have a dating example that works perfectly with this. I went on a date with a guy not too long ago, and he said in the middle of the date, I'm just emotionally unavailable at the moment. Now, I could have been typical Susie Q dating chick and thought, oh, maybe he just needs time, or maybe I could break him out of his shell and all that stuff. But no, Maya Angelou was resonating in my head, and when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And so that is a situation that I will not go into when it comes to dating. When it comes bringing this to your work life and your career, if somebody like your boss says, I'm a straight shooter, then they said it, you need to believe it, and then you can leverage it. So in a meeting where perhaps they're being a little bit wishy-washy on something, then you preface your influential statement with, hey, look, George, I know you're a straight shooter, so I would love your opinion, or I would love your decision on X, Y, and Z. And if you think it's not a right fit, I would love to hear your reasoning behind that. So when somebody tells you how they view themselves, file that in your memory banks, because you might be able to leverage that later on for your influential intention. I love this one so much. Okay, folks, here it is. I have gone through a lot of content. There is so much more that I could share. I'm going to tell you about the Building Personal Influence online course, but hold on, don't leave. I'm going to go through this fast, and then I'm answering your questions. I still have left plenty of time to answer your questions. So, the Building Personal Influence online course, I kid you not, this is probably my favorite thing to do in my career. What is in it? Well, first of all, it kicks off May 21st, so that's a little less than 2 weeks away from today. And where is it? It can be in your home, it can be in your office. You also have recordings, so you can listen to them in the bathtub if you like. What is in the program? So first of all, you get a personal influence manual. It's a 100-page manual that I've put together that I'm quite proud of. And it gives you everything that I know about influence. It gives you the strategies that I learned from the interviews. It gives you the science behind the strategies from what studies have shown in the psychological world as well as neuroscience. There are also 6 content-rich training videos for you. As you probably have been able to tell in this webinar, I really can't help myself. I keep giving content, and that number 6 has grown to number 8, and it may grow again. I also give you covert mission worksheets. So I'm not just giving you the content and then telling you, okay, now figure out how you can use it. I demonstrate situations where you can put it to practice and you can see those results. Next is there is a weekly group phone call with me and the other students. It is Wednesday mornings. First of all, I'm going to explain why it's Wednesday mornings, and second of all, I'm going to tell you if you can't make it to Wednesday mornings, don't worry, I got a plan for you. For the reason why it's Wednesday mornings is because it gives you 2 days earlier in the week to, interact with your colleagues and observe the people around you, and something might come up in the middle of the week. Then on Wednesday morning, we have our call, and you can say, hey, I noticed this, I noticed that, I've got this coming up. and you learn the new content on Wednesday, and then you have 2.5 days after that to put these things to practice. I find having the class on hump day is a perfect way for you to observe for the first part and then implement in the second part of the week. If you cannot make Wednesday mornings, these phone calls are recorded and I put them up in the Influential Resource Center the very next day. Sometimes even the day of, just depends on how fast my computer works. So you get these recordings, and again, with the recordings, you can listen to them the next day, you can listen to them 20 years from now. They are yours to download and use as you wish. I also give you access to a private Facebook group. In the private Facebook group, it's not just people in your class, but it's also people from previous classes. And I already have a plan of how I'm going to engage that community better than I have before. And so it's also a great place to answer or ask questions and get answers and learn from other people's experiences as well. I've done this class before, and just to give you a little insight, for this free webinar today, I'd say well over half of my previous students signed up for this webinar. If you are on this webinar, then I assume that you are like the rest of those students, that you are constantly looking for ways to improve. You love to learn new information, but then also want to put it into action. And I love the fact that so many of my past students signed up for this webinar because they understand the need to look at the information that they learned again, because consistency and seeing things again will make sure that you implement it, as well as they know that I'm constantly putting in new information and growing the repertoire. So I know a few of them learned a few new things today just on this free course. Woohoo! I'm going to minimize this and I'm answering your questions. All right. So, somebody wanted to know about identifying motivational triggers. Oh, by the way, feel free to type your questions in the question box or the chat box, and I'll get to those. So, okay, eye contact or no eye contact. I don't know the situation in which this refers to, but eye contact is usually your best bet. I think that avoiding eye contact shows weakness and usually shows a shifty nature. So try to maintain eye contact and not be creepy about it. There's really no set rule about how long to have eye contact. How to identify personal impact pain during needs analysis using body language. I love this question. All right, so using body language and how to identify the pain trigger is how I'm interpreting this question. If I'm wrong, let me know in the chat box. Usually when somebody hears something that they don't like, also when they are lying, then there are some body language triggers that can occur. The easiest one I find to identify is the eye shielding, which basically translates to a long blink. So if think about, everybody paid their taxes recently, and when your accountant told you the amount that you had to write to the IRS, I'm going to guess that your reaction went something like that, if you're watching me in the video. You hold a longer blink, and sometimes you also take a sigh when you hear something that you're not too thrilled with. Anything with this eye shielding behavior happens when we are triggered by something that causes us pain. So you'll get that same thing when people rub their forehead when they're upset about something. Sorry, that's my dog moving around. And so also a pain identifier can be when they lean away. If they're not happy with what they heard, then they'll lean away. Anything to block them from the words that are coming at them. So those are some of the ways to identify pain triggers. How to slow down intimidating fast talkers. Interesting. Why do you find fast talkers intimidating? Is it because your thought process is a little bit slower than yours? Do you feel like you're not getting your say in edgewise? Do they interrupt you? So those are some of the questions I have. Also, why is it something about their presence that makes them intimidating? Usually somebody who is quote unquote intimidating is somebody that takes up territorial space. They spread out. They sit in their chair, take up space on the conference table, and they lean in. And then when you attach the speed to it, then many people find that intimidating. So if you're not a naturally fast talker, then I would say look at your body language. Perhaps mirror their strong body language. You might need to lean in. You might need to take up space. Put your arm around the chair next to you. Cross your legs where it takes up more space than the ladylike crossing of the legs. And yeah, take up space. Also, when you do that, then it sends powerful hormones in your system to feel more powerful. It decreases your cortisol, it increases your testosterone, and you might feel a little bit more strong when you take that body language. If they interrupt you, one of the techniques that I have is if somebody interrupts me, and if I'm within proximity to them, I touch them on the shoulder and say, oh, let me just finish this one thought. You can say, you could add the please in there. It depends on the personality types. You don't want to appear weak when you do that. You could also say, oh, just please don't interrupt me. I'm almost through, or something along those lines. But the point of this is basically that touch, because touch is a real fast trigger that goes, whoa, something's different, because we don't get touched very often. So touch in an appropriate place, the shoulder, or just back, the back near the shoulder. Okay. How do I capture an audience with a powerful message? If your message is powerful, then you already have captured their attention. Also, many of you have asked about my best public speaking tips. First of all, the best public speaking tip is know your shit, meaning know your content. So know through and through what you're talking about. Know the details of your content. Then, once you know that, you frame your content around that group's influential triggers. So usually when it comes to speaking in front of large groups, you have a wide variety of personality types in the audience, which means that you reiterate your same point, hitting on those motivational triggers. So we talked about moving towards pleasure and away from pain. Incorporate those two in your presentation. We talked about internal benefits versus external benefits. Incorporate both of those in your presentation. We talked about options and procedures. Talk about the options that they could take with the path, and then give them the specific steps within the presentation. I skipped over one of the techniques in the presentation, but want to go ahead and give it to you now, and it's the expectancy effect. I find this to be most helpful when it comes to public speaking. If at the beginning of your presentation you create some sort of an expectancy of what is going to happen at the end of the presentation. So if you say, by the end of the presentation, when you walk out those doors, I fully expect that you will have the tools you need to X, Y, and Z. You might have a few questions, so I want you to know, feel free to email me at any time. I'm here to help you out, anything along those lines. If you are a personal trainer, I think I've got a few personal trainers on the call, then this is also very helpful in your training. Your clients need to know that they need to expect pain. They need to expect temporary failure, because once that failure comes, that, they hit a plateau, if they don't know to expect it, then that is usually when they quit. So in your first few meetings with them, talk to them about what happens, this process of training and changing your body, and let them know that these pitfalls are going to be okay. Therapists who deal with addicts know that some sort of withdrawal, or what's the word I'm looking for, regression. Somebody help me out. When you not rehab, but when you go back into the bad behaviors, addicts know that this is a possibility, to expect it, and they know that relapse. Thank you. They know that a relapse is a potential thing to expect. And so when it does happen, their brain is prepared for, this isn't the ultimate failure, that I still can succeed at my goal. It's okay. I knew to expect this. That's why I like the expectancy effect. All right. We've got... Oh, okay. Somebody wrote out a very long question with multiples in there. They're recruiting for Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a great organization. People say that they can't express themselves and it's holding them back. So they're talking about how to recruit people. And when people say it's holding them back, then I would urge you to get them to fully explain holding them back from what. So trigger that pain. Get them fully immersed in what it means to be held back. How are they not reaching their goals? How are they not reaching their ultimate potential? How are they not getting paid as much at their work because Susie is better at presenting new ideas and projects than they are? Anything along those lines. So get them to immerse in that pain, then provide the solution. People say, I should do Toastmasters, but they are fearful and won't join. So then in this case, I might give you a set of small yeses because you may try to get them to the big yes of join Toastmasters. Break it down to a series of yeses that they can build up to. So maybe you could get them to help you with the speech that you're preparing for. You could get them to listen to a recording from your previous meetings. You could get them to just simply attend a meeting, and you promise them that they won't have to say a freaking word. And you tell the president of your organization, you tell the Toastmaster of that meeting that this person does not have to speak. And that's the rule. So get them to those series of yeses, and then it will get them to the bigger yes. Are you missing the motivational triggers? Yes, more than likely. And what should I do? So I would say look at those motivational triggers that I shared of if it's moving towards pleasure or away from pain. I'm thinking that if they're not joining, then it's moving away from pain. So you need to give them a bigger pain to move away from. Okay. I think I covered those. So what you just saw on me answering questions in a quick fire, I did not prepare those answers, though I just simply wrote them down so I had a place for them. That is also something that you'll get on the coaching calls with the Building Personal Influence program. I love when people go through the section of Stump the Speaker, because I love getting new questions from people and then learning new scenarios in which they're facing, and then giving them the techniques that they need to deal with them. I am going to unmute you. I'm going to be here until the very end. I want to know what you learned today that you can apply right away. And I also want to know if you have any other questions. Okay, I have to go to Q&A mode. So you can unmute yourself. So the nice lady, I believe,
all attendees are muted and may unmute themselves.
If you press *6 or unmute yourself online, then you can ask me questions. You can also type something in the chat. I want to answer any and all questions that you have. We can talk about the course. We can talk about a situation that you're dealing with. And then also, if there was something that really hit home with you today, I would love to learn what that was, because I love learning what resonates with people. All right, well, how about this? From your notes today, sometimes it's easier to think of how you'll use this. So what was something that resonated with you? Okay. Ryan asks, what are some of your favorite influential books? Happy to share. The influential Bible is probably Robert Cialdini's book, Influence. He is a psychologist, and they did a whole bunch of studies. So many of the techniques, there's 7 main techniques that he mentions in that book. Obviously, from the webinar today, you know that there are many more beyond that. So definitely check out Robert Cialdini's book, Influence. It's a difficult read. It's very academic, but you get the idea. You don't have to go through all of it. He has many examples. It's a very good book. The triggers that I mentioned actually come from the interviews that I did with people who are skilled at elicitation techniques. And elicitation is the ability to get information from somebody in a conversational style without them feeling like they're being interrogated or interviewed. So those elicitation techniques are those motivational triggers that I mentioned come from how people use it in elicitation, but I think it easily translates over into so many other areas. We talk about elicitation a bit in the course. I find that elicitation isn't as necessary for a wide variety of people, but just because you're not in corporate espionage, not that I know of. So, but we do talk about how you can use those techniques in the real world, so to speak. Oh, okay. My connection and mic aren't great, but I wanted to share something that resonated with me. I've gone through the course, yay, as you know, but focusing on the value of appreciation as a simple way to make the world a better place really stood out for me on this call. So simple and has a dual influential benefit as well. I agree. It's one of my favorites. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Okay. So I'm going to stay on for like 30 more seconds and wait for anybody to ask anything else. Again, oh, there we go. As a follow-up, have you read Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction? Yes, as well as, oh, what's his other one? Not Mastery. I haven't read Mastery, but the other one of, oh, dear goodness. Oh, the 47 Laws of Power. That's it, Ryan, you got it. Many of those laws of power can be translated into influence as well, and definitely the art of seduction can translate. Again, it was probably one of the most eye-opening things, a little disheartening, but CIA operatives, field operatives, they don't like hearing this, but CIA field operatives actually have very similar techniques to pickup artists. When I interviewed pickup artists and did my research with them, it was shocking as to how they take a lot of the same approach to the intelligence world. So I appreciate the specific exercise you gave towards the beginning of the meeting. I am going to do that. Thanks. Happy that you are going to. And in the course, just so you know, again, I have many covert missions within the course. So that's just simply one example of something that you can put to practice. I want you to be able to practice your influence without other people knowing that you're practicing your influence. Because it's the same thing, like if I say, is it influential if I say X, Y, and Z? It puts that person in a different frame of mind. It's like a stand-up comedian going to somebody and saying, hey, tell me if this joke is funny. You instantly put that person in a critical frame of mind. They are filtering it through something completely different than if you approach it in a casual, normal, conversational way. So that's why I put the covert missions in there, because it gives you the opportunity to practice it, observe it, write down your experiences, and then see which tools will work in different situations. Also, I talk about, this is something that I'm adding into the course this go round, is how you can figure out the influential profile for people and incorporate it into your CRM. This was one of the things that I surveyed my people, and this was one of the things that people were really interested in. So you have somebody's phone number and address and all that stuff in your Outlook or your contacts. But I want you to also have a tab or a page of, this is how I influence this person. This is what I've learned about them. These are the motivational triggers I've observed. And again, it's so taking the observe and then connecting the dots and then figuring out an influential strategy. So on the calls, I talk a lot about how people can influence one particular person. That's why I do the spot coaching, because you need to see the process of how I approach new goals with different situations, with different strategies, rather than giving you like, well, this is just the way you should do it. What I love about communication skills is there is no cookie cutter approach. There just isn't. And anybody who tells you otherwise is full of shit. Sorry, that's just the way it is. So be aware of the fact that what you get in the course, as well as any of my coaching, is specific customized information for all the different situations that you will run into. And then you will be able to see like, oh, okay, so when she sees that these are the triggers, then this is what I'll say for that particular person. And you then start to see certain patterns as to how you develop that influential strategy. So that is one of the reasons why I like the course so much as well. We still have 11, 12 people on the call. You guys are troopers staying after. I would love to hear any other things that resonate with you, things that you think you can put to use. And of course, I'm here to answer questions. Another exercise that you can do from today's program, I recommend, is look at those motivational triggers and look at those desires and tendencies that I mentioned and see if you can identify for yourself which ones are higher in the hierarchy. Because the more you learn about yourself, then the easier you'll be able to identify what you need to adjust when dealing with different people. So I find that this is something that I share very often is the more you learn about these other people, the people around you and human beings in general and how we react to things, it's amazing how you actually start to learn more about yourself. And I think that's one of the magical things about this content and the course is, remember at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about how people take those quizzes and try to learn about themselves and all those self-help books and everything. I think that when we actually expand our focus to others and learn about them, then we get this ancillary benefit of actually learning more about ourselves. So it comes from, instead of a selfish place of me, it's them, them. Oh yeah, me too. And I think that that's what's really cool about this whole field in general. Okay. 30 seconds. Other questions? Other thoughts? I really hope you guys got something out of this. Like I mentioned, I was packing as much in there as I could in our short time together. Needless to say, there is so much more. The 6-week program easily could probably be about 8 to 10 weeks. But I figure 6 weeks is a good enough time for you to commit to something, learn the skill set, give you the chance to practice, come back and report. And again, you have that Facebook group as well to interact with everybody else who has been in the course. So I hope you learned something today. I hope you put it to practice. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Many of you have my email address, and of course, I would love to have you in the Building Personal Influence 6-week course. It's coming up soon. I'm very excited, and I know for a fact you guys are going to get a lot out of it. Thank you for your time today. I know it's precious, and I know it's valuable, and I know you probably have something else to get to. But again, take a look at the course, and I am here for you. So have a wonderful day. Observe your fellow human beings, and stay connected.